would like to start, this is okay.
Right, we'll say that. Okay, so this time next week, here will already be Shavuot, and Shavuot is the Chag of Matan Torah. And one of the ways we celebrate Minhag Yisrael to eat dairy foods, to eat milchiks on Shavuot. Why do we eat milchiks? We eat milchiks because, number one, Medrash tells us that when Klal Yisrael received the Torah, they suddenly were confronted with halachas of kashrus. Now, what's easier to prepare? Milchiks or fleishiks? Milky food, dairy food, or fleishik food? Fleishik food, you have to shach the animal, etc. It's not so simple. So what was easiest to prepare was the dairy food. That's why we eat dairy food.
No, I don't know.
Okay.
My late wife always told me for Shabbos we eat always fleishik, but there are people here in Holland, they have milky.
Yes.
And she says much more work. Much more.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
yeah.
The other reason is that this is one of the items to which Torah is compared. The Moshel to Torah. Vash v'cholav tach shoshonim. The pasuk says there's honey and milk underneath your tongue. Those are both parables to the Torah. Al koponim. In any event, one of the foods that features on the Yeshua's table is cheesecake. They used to say, if you count the Sfiras HaOmer, you count every evening, make sure you count it every night. You know what the reward is at the end. On Shavuot, you'll get cheesecake.
It's the present.
The present. Yeah. Okay, so tonight I would like to talk about subject of the bracha on cheesecake. You might say, cheesecake. What's the problem with cheesecake? Cheesecake is cake, right? So on cake you make mazonos. That's not so straightforward, as we'll find out. I'll ask you a few questions. First of all, cheesecake is cheese and cake. So why do we make just mazonos? We should make shahakol on the cheese and very many mazonos on the cake. Cake is made from flour, usually wheat flour. One question. Another riddle. On breads, we make hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Wash, after it's done, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and after we've finished eating the bread, we bench. Because is it possible that not only will we not make hamotzi at the beginning, we'll not maybe say bichas hamozon at the end, we won't make any bracha whatsoever on the bread? Is there such a case? And the answer to this, Rabbi say, is in the Shulchan Aruch. It's the Feisha Shulchan Aruch. Let's talk, first of all, about the din of Iyar and Tofel. The halacha is that when we have a combination of various foods, we don't necessarily have to make a bracha on each and every food. Like let's say you have a cake recipe, and the cake there's flour, there's eggs, there's sugar, there's cocoa, there's nuts, there's pieces of banana. You can make many brachas on that, right? The flour you make mazonos, on the nuts probably you make paper eights, shahakol, and some of the other things. It could be a number of brachas. The answer is we don't do that because the halacha is, and this is a mishnah in brachas daf mem daled on base, that whenever you have two foods, you have an Iyar and a Tofel, the main food and the secondary food. You make the bracha on the Iyar, and then you don't need to make a bracha on the Tofel. It's secondary, it's bottled to the main food. Okay, so this is brought in Shulchan Aruch in Orech Chaim Siman Reish Yud Beis Sif Aleph. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Kol Shu Iyar Imoy Tefela. Whenever you have a main food and something which is secondary, Pirush Davar Bilti Nechshav, something which is not important. Mavarich Ala Iyar Upoita Esat Tefela. You make a bracha on the main food, and with that you are part of making a food on the secondary food. Bein the bracha shelafoneha, bein the bracha shelachareha. So says the Shulchan Aruch, that does not only apply to the bracha before, but to the bracha afterwards as well. The only bracha you make is the bracha on the main food. The secondary food is carried on its back, so to speak, both the bracha beforehand and the bracha afterwards. Okay, now, says the Shulchan Aruch and other. You might say, if I have them mixed together, So then I say, what are the amazing ingredients over here, right? Is the main ingredient, whatever is the main ingredient, that's the one you make the bracha on. Let's say it's you have potatoes with some meat, right? So you make a bracha on the potatoes and you maybe pata the meat, or the other way around. It depends which one is the ikar. We also have to ask ourselves another very important question is, how do you measure which one is the ikar? Is it dependent on quantity, which is the more larger quantity? Is it dependent on what you prefer to eat, what you're really interested in eating, or are there other considerations? We'll come to all of these ideas soon. So says the Shulchan Aruch another chiddush. That doesn't only apply if the two are mixed together. The secondary one is together with the main food. Elo afilu kol echad levadoi. Even if each one is standing alone on the plate, you can see, right? These are the meat and these are the potatoes. They're not mixed together. You still make a bracha. Bracha rishoina and bracha aroina is governed by the one which is the ikar. Says the Be'alocha. The Be'alocha quotes the Chaim, that's the Banan Asivis, the Yaakov Melissa, and he says, "V'stam mashu horoif wa'ikar." Says the Shulchan, says the Chaim, that if we were trying to determine which is the main one, in most cases, the one which is the majority, that's the ikar. Okay, so that's where you have to look. What do I have more of? What do I have less of? The one I have more of, that's the one I make the bracha rishoina and bracha achroina. But there is one major exception to this. Says the halacha, "Avim yesh b'taroides afilu ma'at mechamisha minei dogon she'ir b'soichoi kedei lechoil v'vorech b'yimei mezoines u'poita ashrin." If one of the species, one of the types of food which is on your plate, your bowl, is mezoinus, is from the 5 types of grain, pan sorter, then that's what governs the bracha. It always becomes the ikar. It's the ikar, right? It may be the mute, it may be the minority, but it has a special importance. And then if you have a mixture of, for example, this is a classic example. We have a cholent. This is maybe considered to be a more Eastern European food, but it's very popular in Western Europe. That you have, let's say, barley. Barley is one of the that's a grain, and you have potatoes. You have some meat as well. So the bracha on such a cholent is b'yimei mezonos, only b'yimei mezonos. And at the end, you see if certain conditions are fulfilled, you make ala michri. That's what the Bihalach is. Okay, so that's what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. The Shulchan Aruch tells us, number one, Ikar and Tofel, usually we see it's the right. It means which is the majority. And that governs the bracha before and after. Unless there's some zoynus there, that automatically becomes the most important. Is that always so? Perhaps there's something else we have to take into consideration, and that is, what is the mezoinus doing? What function does it fulfill? Is it there to feed you? For sustenance? Is it there for the taste? Or does it have another function? And that is, perhaps it binds the food together, perhaps it makes it look nice, perhaps it adds perhaps to even the nice smell of the food. So that's discussed also in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Reish Dalet. Sif Yud Beis. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Koshu Ikar, the Imoy Tfeila, Mavarich al Ikar or Kodesh Etzvil. That's exactly as we just learned. Whenever you have the main food and the secondary food, you make a bracha on the main food, and you don't have to make any bracha either before or afterwards on the secondary food. Says the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber says, I have to qualify this. V'chol dover shema'avin oisel dabek, oilitein reach, oikdei litzvoya hatavshil, harizet tefeila. There's a Shulchan Aruch, a cloud. If the function of this particular ingredient is just to join the food together, or to give a nice smell, or to color the food, that's called tefillah. That's called automatically, that's called secondary. That is not the main point of a food. But if you mix it in order to give a taste to the mixture, then that taste is important. That now makes it more important. That's the important ingredient, the main ingredient. Let me give some examples. Let's go back and continue in racial bets. So Rabbi said we've seen something very important. That is important is not necessarily dependent on quality or quantity. It may not even be dependent on mazonis. Mazonis doesn't have the priority if its function is not for taste or for sustenance, but to fill you up. Right? If it's just there to hold the food together, to enhance the appearance of the food or the smell of the food, then it's automatically considered secondary. Which brings us to the case of the herring. Right? I asked you in the beginning, is it possible that we can eat herring? I'll give the answer. Sorry. We can eat hamoitzi, bread, and we don't have to make a bracha before, and we don't have to make a bracha afterwards. And the answer to that is another Dutch favorite food, the herring, but not the Dutch recipe, as we'll see. Says the Vafilu pas, says the Mechaber. Shehu choshuv mikoil. It's the most important food. Imhu tofel. If its role is secondary, kagoy, for example, she'oichel dag meliach. Dag meliach means salted fish, but it was typically herring. V'oichel pas imoy, and he eats some bread together with the herring. Kedei shelo yazikenu bigroina, because this herring has got a very sharp taste, and it hurts his throat. So in order to take away the sharp taste, what does he do? Eat some bread with it. He may even eat a whole kazayas of bread, right? Because he's going to protect his throat. I said this is not the Dutch herring, because the Dutch herring, even the Zura herring, is not so sharp, right? It's for sure the regular herring has a very nice taste, a pleasant taste to it. So there are the recipes for herring. You find them here in Eastern European countries, and they're very sharp, very, very sharp. So if somebody wants to eat the herring, he enjoys the herring, but he has a sharp taste in his throat, and he needs to take it away, take the taste away. You know, sometimes you see people, that's not with herring so much. Another example is people drink whiskey. So other intoxicating liquor, schnapps. The schnapps, strong schnapps, and people are not used to it. So they drink some schnapps at a simcha, and burns their throat. So what do? They reach for the cake, and they put it in their mouth. Do they have to make a bracha on that cake? Says the Mechaber, no. Because the reason they're eating cake is they're not interested in the cake at all. They don't want to eat cake. What they want to do is they've got this sharp taste in their mouth, in their throat. It's hurting them. They want to take that bad taste away, the negative taste away. That's why they eat the cake. If that's the case, says the Mechaber, you don't make any bracha, neither before nor after, on the cake. The cake is now tofel, because its function is solely to enable you to eat to drink the brandy, the schnapps. Or in the case of the herring, in order to eat the herring, well, after the after effects of the herring, you need to eat a piece of bread or a cracker. Okay, so very important to note, this is not halacha l'maaseh in most cases, because generally speaking, you know, you go to a kiddush, you go to a simcha, and they often serve herring, but sometimes very strong herring, with crackers. So that's why you say nowadays people don't just eat the cracker in order to enable them to eat the herring. They're interested in the cracker as well. If they're interested in both, then they have to make a bracha on both. They make a bracha on the mezonos, on the cracker, and shahakol on the herring. So that's very important to note. That's what we've seen here. And we were determining Iyar and Tofel. Iyar and Tofel depends very much on not only what you're eating, the quantity, Chamishas Minei Dogon, the Beim Minei Mazonos, but why are you eating this food? What function, what purpose does it serve? Okay. So let's take a look at different types of cheesecake. And before we do that, we need to turn to the whole sugya of cake. Where do we find cake mentioned in the Mishnah and the Gemara? So there's something called pas habor b'kisnin. What is pas habor b'kisnin? Literally, it's bread which comes in pockets. What is the bread that comes in pockets? Well, it's mashma, Rashi, Brochas, and Aleph on the base. That what they used to have, what they used to eat, some bread at the end of a meal filled with fruit or filled with other fruits, and the Maisa, because they're not eating it as a separate food, it's not eating mainly for the bread. The bracha changes. So pasabol bekisn is basically the term that the Gemara and the Halacha uses to talk about cake. But there are different types of cake. So says the Machaber in Sivan Kuf Samaches Zayin, pas habor bekisnin. What is pas habor bekisnin? A bread which comes in a pocket form. Yesh mefroshim pas she'osu kimin kisim. Some say the pshat is it's bread which is like shaped into a pocket. Shememalin oisam dvash or sukkar. They fill it with either honey or sugar. Begoizim, nuts, shkedim, almonds, tavlin, spices. And here he gives the name in Arabic. Okay, so that's basically what we're doing is we're taking pas, bread made out of flour and water. But since we're filling it with all types of other foods, the bracha changes. Even though it's pas, you don't make hamoitzi on this. You'll make a different bracha. You're going to make very many names. So that's one pshat. One pshat is you take bread, but the function of the bread is used just to wrap up your fruit. It could be to wrap up fish or meat. The bracha changes. It's no longer hamoitzi. It's very many names. One pshat. Another pshat. V'yesh einim. Shehi isa she'arav ba devash shemen or cholav. Others learn that pas habor bekisnin is not just that you first break the bread and then afterwards you use it to shape it into a pocket. We're talking about actually kneading the dough. You start off with a bread dough, right? And you add other ingredients like honey, oil, milk, different spices. It could be all types of different ingredients. That, even though this contains flour and water, you bake it. You don't make hamoitzi. It's not regular bread, but it is mezonos. One condition, says the Macham. He makes a condition. And he says, when you eat this bread, this mixture, it doesn't taste like regular bread. Now, regular bread, you know what the bread tastes like, right? The flour and water is made into bread, salt. Here you actually taste all the added ingredients. You taste there's honey there, you taste that there's maybe nuts, there's milk there. That changes the taste of the food. Okay. So now the Ramah says, some say that this is called regular bread. Then can yesh behem harbe tavlin or dvash kimine mesika shekoin leka. Okay. So others say that it's not good enough that you can somehow discern the taste of the other ingredients. It has to have a strong taste, right? And harbe tavlin or dvash. Okay. So that according to the Ramah, lekach is an example of where you would make very many desserts. And that covers most cakes. How do you bake cake? You take flour and you mix it sometimes with a bit of water, then eggs, oil, marge, sugar, cocoa, all sorts of other ingredients. So bracha, bracha rishoina on such cake is mizonos. That's called basar bor b'kusna. The yesh meforshim is another pshat. Shuhu pas bein metubeles bein she'ein metubeles. We're talking about bread, whether it's got spices added or not. She'oisin oisei ke'evim yeveshim. But koisesim oisam. It's something which is very thin, dry pieces of bread. Halacha kedivrei kulam. So the Mechaber concludes, halacha is like all three opinions and all three types of baked goods. The bracha for that is mezonos. Okay, so now let's look at different types of cheesecake. One type of cheesecake is a cheesecake where you may put all the ingredients together. It's not usually, people don't usually make cake that way, cheesecake rather. The other types of cake where when you're making the actual dough, all the added ingredients are mixed in. So that is the poshut. It's very clear that the bracha rishoina for that is very many. What happens if you have various layers? You're going to have a layer of cake, and on that you have a layer of cheese. What bracha do you make on that? So there, the Haskamas agree that if it's baked together, then it's considered to be part of the same food, part of the mezonos, and the bracha on that is mezonos. There's a third possibility, and that is you first bake the dough, and then afterwards, after the dough, the baked dough, the cake comes out of the oven, then you add the other ingredients, you add the topping. You add cream, cheese, sometimes fruit, sometimes other ingredients. What happens then? So then we have to look at the relationship between the cake and the topping. Is the topping there to enhance the cake? Or does it have chashivos b'fnei atzmai? It has importance. Are you interested in eating cake, or are you interested in eating what's on top? So in the majority of cases with cheesecake, the cheese, it's either the cheese topping, not the cheese, yes, some other ingredients as well, is put on there before you bake it, and it's baked together. If it's baked together, it goes in together, comes out together, and you make the same bracha. You bake the berim and mezonos on this. You may afterwards decide to decorate the cake with some cream, bit of chocolate, all sorts of other things on top. But that's clearly secondary to the cake, and that it would not require a separate bracha. The whole shaila is what happens if you have you add fruit, a generous layer of fruit, after you take the cake out of the oven. Full emotional, right? Let's say you bake a basic cheesecake in the oven. You have the dough. On that, you put the layer of cheese, the cheese mixture. You baked it, and it comes out of the oven. And the Shavuot, you want the lady of the house wants to add a whole lot of fruit, slices of peach, strawberries, or other fruit on top. So that already now becomes a shine. Because if you are interested in both the cake, the cheesecake, and the topping, and each one is important in your eyes, it will well be that you need to make two brachas. You need a bracha of beim mezonos, which patters the cake with the cheese on top, with some cream on top, some lettuce on top, whatever it might be. But when it comes to this generous topping of fruit, or right, strawberries, could be peaches, whatever it might be, you need to make a separate bracha. Okay, that's another type of cheesecake. Now, sometimes cheesecake is not cheese and cake, it's a cake of cheese. What do I mean by that? This you find often in bought cakes, bought cheesecakes. They like to make a nice, very rich mixture of cheese plus ingredients, but you can't really serve that because it's going to fall apart. So what do? They put some cheese, a base, underneath the cheesecake, they put a base of dough on the side, sometimes on top. And what sort of bracha do you make? You say, you have here mazoinus. But didn't we just learn? It all depends what function the mazoinus is serving. What is it doing for the cake? Is it there for the taste? Is it there for the sustenance? The answer to both questions is no. So what's it there? Letabek. It's there to hold the cake together. If that's its sole function, then the bracha on this cheesecake is shahakol niyeh bidvaroi. It's a shahakol cheesecake. Okay, so those are the various types of cheesecake, right? We have cheesecake, which is pure mazoinus. It's the majority of cases. We have cheesecake, which is mazoinus plus could be bei pri eitz, bei pri adama. And we have cheesecake, which is pure shahakol. These are all the different types of cheesecakes that you can find. Somebody was talking to me some time ago about a special type of diet. And he said to me, he said, you can make cheesecake out of kohlrabi. Obviously, that's for fake cheesecake. I don't think you'd be yotz on Shavuot with such a cheesecake. Okay, so we've discussed here the bracha rishona. What bracha do you make before you eat your cheesecake? And we have a number of categories. Generally speaking, it's mazoinus, only mazoinus. Sometimes it may be an additional bracha. And on some occasions, it's only shahar. Those are the options of the bracha rishona cheesecake. What about the bracha achrona? What bracha do you make after eating cheesecake? Well, you say cake is bari meim and azoinus, right? Okay. After bari meim and azoinus, what's the nach bracha? What's the bracha achrona? Alamichia. Not so straightforward. We'll take a look at a Gemara in Brachas Daf Mem Aleph on the base. The Gemara, Rav Sheshes is over there. He makes a surprising statement. She'ein lecha davar she'toam bracha lefanov, ve'ein toam bracha le'acharav, elo pascha bo b'kisnin b'vad. Says Rav Sheshes, generally speaking, when you eat food, you have to make a bracha before, a bracha rishona. You have to make a bracha at the end, bracha achrona. But there's one exception. And that is our friend Pascha bo b'kisnin. When you eat some cake, you don't have to make it after. What's going on? So Rashi over there explains. What's Pascha bo b'kisnin? After eating the meal and benching, they used to bring these pockets. What was and Mevin Imohen Pashin Loisha im Tablin Kein Urias Shalano Mitor Shenoisnin, but Tablin Harbe, the Egoizim Mushkedin, since, or this sounds like one of the types of Pascha kissing which we learned in Shulchan Aruch, right? It's a type of bread, and it's filled with all sorts of other ingredients, nuts, sugar, honey, all sorts of other things like that. Because there's a lot of that. Umachola muat. And you don't eat much of it. Machola muat. Loi hit inu bracha in sholosh. Because you eat so little, you don't have to make an alamich. Mida dehava a pas oires v'doich. Says Rashi, you compare this to a different type of bread. Nowadays, they try to make bread out of all sorts of different materials, different ingredients. So, how about rice bread? So, rice bread is very interesting. Rice, well-cooked rice, on rice bread, you would make very many mazonas beforehand, but the nach bracha, the bracha achrona, is boirin nefashos, says Rashi. So here also, you're going to eat this Pascha b'kisnin. You have this nice pocket filled with nuts and honey and sugar and other pleasant food, tasting foods. You don't need much of it. It's not really a major. It's not you're really eating your meal. It's something like eat afterwards over the coffee. So the after bracha is very nefashos. Comes along Tosfos and says, I don't agree with you, Rashi. V'lo nehira Chadad Amrinan Le'el Kol Sheyesh Bei Chamishes Minei Dogon Tzorich Baracha Mein Shalosh. So first of all, says Tosfos, I don't agree with you, Rashi, because we know that whenever there is one of the 5 types of grain, the bracha afroina is alamicha. And Rashi, you're comparing this to rice bread and so on. Look, if that is the classic example, why didn't the Gemara bring that example? Why is it talking about pascha b'lisnin? We know there are occasions on which you make a bracha rishona, but the bracha afroina is not alamicha. So the clearest case would have been rice bread. Why didn't the Gemara bring that? That's a kasha on you, Rashi. Therefore, Tosfos learns that what we're doing here is this pascha b'kisnin is not being eaten after the meal is over. It's being eaten at the end of the meal, but before you've benched. So the chiddush of Rav Sheshes is, look here, you're eating something and it's not really part of the meal. You need to make a bracha rishona. However, a separate bracha afroina is not required. Why? Because this is covered by benching. And that's the thing. The tradition of Sheshes is, here you have to make a bracha rishona, but a bracha afroina is not required because birchas hamazon patters this food as well. It's also got bread, filled bread. Okay, Tosfos Rabbeinu Yonah, that's the parish on the Rith in Brachos. He quotes Rashi, and so he says, "Upirish harav zal, the ein lecha davar v'lo yeh ton bracha lacharav me'ein ha-bracha shelachona." Third, it says, usually speaking, what bracha you make after eating the food is determined by what bracha you made before eating the food. Yeah, for example, let's say you make very hagofen on wine or grape juice. What's the after bracha? Different. Okay, if you make bracha before you eat the food, what's the bracha afterwards? Alamicha. Here, says Rav Sheshes, is the exception. You're not eating it during the meal. You're eating it after the meal at another time. But the bracha rishona is b'yim mezonos. You have a pascha b'kisnin. Okay, that's mezonos. But the after bracha will be boyei nefashos. And that's the chiddush of Rav Sheshes. Okay, fine. So that's another pshat. We have 3 pshatim. Rashi says the chiddush here is, since you don't eat so much of it, you're only eating after the meal. The after bracha is there's no alamich. Tosfos learns you're eating it at the end of the meal. It's not really part of the meal. You have to make a bracha b'yim before, but no bracha afroina. You can and Tosfos Rabbeinu Yonah learns that the bracha before and the bracha after do not follow the regular pattern. Usually, the bracha rishona determines what is the bracha achrona. Here you make b'yim and mezonos, which is usually followed by alamicha. On this occasion, it's followed by boyei nefesh. Let's now take a look at the Rambam. Rambam says in the Perek Gimel Halacha Yud Aleph Minchas Brachos, Kol shemevarchin olav b'tchila hamoitzi, mevarchin acharav b'soif birchas hamazon. Okay. Whenever you make a hamoitzi at the beginning, before you eat the food, the bread, at the end of the meal, you have to bench birchas hamazon and kisidra, abra brachos. Now, b'chol shemevarchin olav b'tchila b'yimei mezonos, mevarchin b'soif l'acharav bracha achas b'ein shalosh. Says Rambam, if the bracha rishona is b'yimei mezonos, what's the after bracha? Alamicha. Chutz. There's an exception to the Rambam. Min ha'oretz, except for rice bread. There you make b'yimei mezonos before, boyei nefashos at the end. No mention here of pascha b'kisnin. Why not? There's a Lechem Mishnah. He says, pascha b'kisnin, mevarech levasoif birchas hamazon. The Lechem Mishnah, do you know what bracha you make after pascha b'kisnin? At the bench, properly. Okay, so what does the Gemara mean? What does Rav Sheshes mean when he says, so when is it that you have to make a bracha before Pasach Bo Kisnin? If you don't make a bracha afterwards, that's when you eat it in the middle of the meal. That's the chiddush. No separate bracha achron is required. So you see, the Rambam learns like Tosfos. Now, Shulchan Aruch paskins that if somebody Erev Kemach Doichen V'Shah Minei Kitnus in Kemach Shel Mishes Minei Doga, what happens if you have a mixture of grain flour and let's say rice flour? You mix them together and you cook them in a pot. You made kneblach, right? For mixture of wheat flour and rice flour. The bracha is b'yemei mazonos and ala michya. V'im osam yemenu pas movarech hamoitzi u'bichas hamozon. And if you made bread out of it, of this mixture, what's the bracha before? Hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. What's the bracha afterwards? Benching, for bichas hamozon. But then the Shulchan Aruch adds another tonight. The dafka sheyesh ba'oisei kemach mishes aminim kedei sheyoichal mimenu kezais v'dogon b'chtiyas. He says you have a mixture, but you have to be aware that when you're eating this mixture, this wheat and rice flour mixture, the bread made out of that, you have to be aware that you must consume kezais of wheat within the achilas pas. It's about 4 minutes. In other words, as far as the chiyuv of bichas hamozon is concerned, the rice doesn't count. Now, Mishnah Berurah says that ala michya you can't make unless you've eaten kezais of dogon b'chtei achilas pas. And if you didn't eat so much, then you would make boil nefashim. So basically what he's saying is like this. You ate something made out of a mixture of wheat flour and rice flour. Now, in total you had much more than a kezais, but you didn't have a kezais of wheat. So you can't make ala michya, but you can make boil nefashim. So, Bialocha says, even though Mechaber is talking about a mixture of different types of flour, the added ingredient doesn't have to be flour. It could be other stuff as well, other ingredients. You could say, L'moshel, you had vash, v'tavlin, v'shalminim, then you also need to have a kezayis, b'chdei achilas pras of wheat. Okay, so let's consider this for a moment. It comes out, according to what we're learning here, that if I have a regular cake, a cake which is made out of wheat flour and other ingredients, oil, eggs, sugar, cocoa, nuts, raisins, all sorts of things inside, and I've eaten much more than a whole kezais of cake, I could still not be able to make ala michya. Why? Because I didn't eat a kezais of dogon, of wheat, the 5 types of grain, within 4 minutes. I'd have to make boil nefashim. But then the halacha, the Chavetz Chaim, adds something very interesting. Mikol mokoy, noyagin ha'olam levorech olav v'asoif ala michya. When it comes to lekach, zucker lekach, that means a regular cake, a cake where there's flour and oil, margarine, sugar, and the person eats a nice piece of cake, he makes ala michya. He doesn't consider, tell me, did I have a kezais of flour there? Minhag ha'olam, the minhag of the world, the accepted minhag is to make ala michya. Even though the Maisa, he did a kezais of wheat flour. Chazon Ish explains, he said, yeah, I'll explain to you why. Quite simply, because all the other ingredients are bottled, are secondary to the flour. So they become part of the flour. That's his explanation. Now, the source of this din of the Biur Halacha is the Chai Adam. Chai Adam says that Afal Gav, the whole davar sheyesh by chameshes minei dogon mevorchim b'yemim zaynes. Al birch al amechia hayo royo lahachmir elam kein yesh bo eisem machol kolkach sheyochal kazais kemach v'dei chayles. There's the Chai Adam. There should be a difference between the bracha rishona and the bracha achrona. Bracha rishona, the third bracha before you eat a cake, mezoynes. The shor cake where everything is mixed in with the flour. Afterwards, really and truly, you should have to ask yourself a question. Did I eat a kezais of flour b'chtei akilas pras? If I did, if I didn't, but he says, people aren't careful about this. They say, how much cake did I eat? Is a kezais there? This kezais contained sugar and cocoa and all sorts of other ingredients, eggs, doesn't make any difference. I ate a kezais of cake. I made bayim and zones before. It's all one big lump, all together. Alamish. The yesh lohem al ma'alisma. Says the Chai Adam, right? They have what to rely on. Okay. So in the Sifka base, he writes, "Mikomokem nearly the dafte k'moi lekach shiodua sheika hu lahatim hakemach." Once again, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the function of the other ingredients? You have here kemach, you have here cake. That's the main thing. You wanted some cake, something made out of flour, wheat flour, let's say, and you want to add extra taste to it. So that's why you add the other ingredients, the sugar, etc., and the cocoa. That's why it becomes part. But there are other cases where the Maisa, we're interested in both foods. They're not interested in just the one. In which case, it will not become bottled. It will not become one, but become bottled to the other. So he says like this. Let's get back to our wheat flour and rice flour mixture. Somebody decides to mix that together. I'm sure there's somebody out there who holds that's the healthiest way to eat bread. Yeah, he's written a few books about it. But why does a person add the rice flour to the wheat flour? The answer is that basically he's enhancing the wheat flour. He wants it to satiate him, fill him better, feed him better. That's for the taste. And there he says a chiddush. Let's say you would have a lot of rice flour and not so much wheat flour. Since the wheat flour is the Iyar, and it's meant there for feeding you, for sustaining you, for the taste, then you make al-hanichya, make well, before, and al-hanichya as well. It comes here, lahatim esakem, to give extra taste to the kem. Okay. Comes along Moshe Feinstein. Igros Moshe, Erechaim Chilik Aleph, Siman Ayin Aleph, and he discusses the brocha achrona on tzukar lekach, regular cake made with flour, sugar, honey, some other ingredients, oil, eggs. What brocha do you make? So he says, well, I know the minhag ha'olam. The people are generally in the custom of making planish. Okay, why? Because it comes to enhance the other ingredients come to enhance the flour. He doesn't like that as well. So the truth is that the Mishnah Berurah adds an eitzah. He says, in order to get out of all sorts of suffix, make sure that before you make your bracha achrona, you have consumed kezais of flour b'chtei achilas in 4 minutes. Says Moshe Feinstein, the eitzah of the Mishnah Berurah is not just good advice; it's essential. because that's the only way you're going to get out of a very difficult problem. Because he says like this. Let's say you ate a kazais of cake, but it didn't contain a kazais of wheat flour. Okay, so do you make alamichya? Don't you make alamichya? Machloitis. If you make alamichya, machloitis. To make boy nefashos, he says that's also not a solution because you're going against the minhag ha'olam. You're not allowed to do that. So the only way to get out of the sofek is to make sure that you eat more cake. And you eat it quick, within a certain amount of time. You eat the size of wheat flour within the 4 minutes. Perhaps you can even make up to 9 minutes. That's the maximum share today. That's the shitta of the Moshe Feinstein. Turns out, Rabbi say, that when the person ate an ordinary piece of cake and didn't contain a kazayis of wheat flour, you have 3 different opinions, right? And you can make. Ayodam says minhag ha'olam is to make alamichya. Others say you should make nefashos. Moshe Feinstein says you've got to eat more. You've got to eat enough to make sure that you've eaten the kezayis which they are first class, and then you can say alamichya. That's the only way of getting out of this stuff. So let's apply this now to our cheesecake. Let's take the easiest case. The cake, the flour is only there to make sure that the cheese stays in place. And you don't get your fingers to dirt. There's a very thin layer around the sides, underneath, perhaps on top as well. What bracha do you make? Well, what bracha do you make before you ate it? You made shakol niyeh b'dvoroi. You make shakol niyeh b'dvoroi before. The bracha afterwards, the bracha afroinen is boy nefashos. Simple. If you have a regular cheesecake where the 2 ingredients, the 2 lots were baked together. Right? You have, let's say, either cheese was mixed into the flour, or you have a layer of cheese which is baked on top of a layer of cake. So then you can have a shaila. Now, even when it's mixed together, some say that it's not mitzdaref. You would say boy nefashos. Some would say you would say alamichya. The third instance is where the cheeses are put on later. Surely if it was a topping. There, it is the Aruch HaShulchan, and I see afterwards with Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that's also where he says, V'nearly, namumoloim bebasa or bebeitzin, ebegvina, ein habasa bebeitzin, v'agvina mitztaf in the kezayis. What happens if you have a pocket of dough? And inside that, you have lying loose, some fruit, eggs, some meat, some cheese. Then they're not mitzvah to the shia because they are standing separate. They all made between atzma. There, for sure, if you want to make alamichya, you need to have a kezayis of dough. Only if you have a kezayis of dough are you going to be able to make alamichya. I have here a sefer written by Diane Krauss, the real Krauss, called Mokaya Bracha, and it is approbation, a haskama from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he says here, Gama yes terosai benagea leugas kibina. I'm going to write to you something about cheesecake, or kruchis, and strudel. So another case, which is very similar, is a strudel. What is a strudel? Strudel, you have a layer of dough, and inside you have fruit. Since the cheese, the fruit, the cheese and the cheese on the cheesecake, or the fruit inside the strudel are separate, you can see they're separate. So, since he has a thick layer of dough, what's the bracha before? The after bracha is not it's boy nefashos. Why? Because usually, if you eat a strudel, how much dough do you actually have? You have how many strudels, how fast you have to eat a lot of strudel in order to get in a kezayis of dough. In other words, the minhag ha'olam that was being discussed by the Chai Adam was talking about where the other ingredients are mixed in with the flour. Then there's a svara to say when it becomes part of the flour, and therefore you can make an alamichya on the mixture, on the entire dough. It's part of the dough. But when they are separate, as in cheesecakes and as in strudel, there for sure, if you just have a small amount of dough, you have a lot of cheese, or typically in the case of strudel, what bracha do you make on the strudel? After the strudel? Before the strudel, you make bayim and emazonis. After the strudel, definitely bayim and fashis. Right. And he says here, "V'lo domi lelekach." It's not like the case of lekach, right? The lekach of the Chai Adam, took a lekach, mentioned by the Mr. Brewer, a regular cake where you have flour mixed with the honey, with other ingredients. Since it's mixed in, it says sukkah shemur of yofe. He said there it's mixed together, it becomes one entity. This is different from what we've mentioned above, says the Shlomo Zalman. Even as far as the bracha rishon is concerned, they're secondary to the dough, meaning you make a bracha on the dough, they are physically separate, and since they are separate, then if you didn't eat of dough, within 4 minutes, then you should make boyin of fashion. Rav Krauss adds, and he says that this is correct if there's a desire of other foods, of fruit, the strudel, of cheese, and then the cheesecake without the dogon, without the flour. But if there is a kazayis, then you only have a kazayis by joining the two foods. Then there's a very big machlokas. What bracha you make afterwards? The kitzur, Rabbi say, what we've learned tonight is that the humble cheesecake, the hero of the Shavuot table, which we eat, the Lechvoid Matan Torah, it's got a lot of Torah attached to it. I have not yet encountered a recipe book with cheesecake recipes of different shapes and sizes, different types, and somebody writes the end what the bracha is, bracha rishona, bracha achroina. But now, Baruch Hashem, we have the tools to be able to tell ourselves, tell other people what bracha we make on cheesecake. The cheesecake brings us a lot of bracha, tzlocha, and we should be zeicher to be makabel the Torah, the simcha of our.
Oh my God, we can eat now cheesecake. How we know now how we have to eat it.
That's right.
That's right. Go
to.
Go to.
You eat yonder in the morning cheesecake as well.
Yeah. Listen, there's no limit. I once had to review a sefer about Bosser B'Cholov. And there are certain types of Hasidim who are very machmir about waiting between meat and milk. The Gemara actually mentions that there was somebody who, if he ate on one day, he ate meat, he wouldn't eat milk till the next day. It's a chumrah, a very big chumrah, which is not halakha l'maaseh. There was a certain Rebbe who used to do such things, and so what was he going to do about the minhag to eat milchiks on Pesach, on Shavuot? So right there, this Rebbe on Shavuot morning when he came home, he made kiddush. And perhaps he ate some parva cake. He used to take a spoon and put it into some hot liquid, and then suck the liquid off the spoon. That's how he was yotzer with eating milchiks on Shavuot.
No, the question is if you eat a milchik meal as well yonder morning, because okay. I know there are people who think they should eat fleishing on yonder morning.
So there are those who are, I want to tell you a chiddush. There are some people who hold you should eat flesh on the evening as well.
Oh.
This is another share that I have. I don't know if we have to wait for next Shavuos. There's a very big discussion in the Poskim. What do you have to eat on Yom Tov to be the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov? Does it have to be meat? Is the meat that is associated with Simchas Yom Tov after the meat of the korbanos? Or is it, can we, if we eat regular, let's say, beef, are we also yotzer? Do we have to eat it? Do we have to drink wine? These are all questions which you can think about, but I can't answer at the moment.
We also say, boss of a doggy, as we Dutch, we eat Shabbos morning, we eat gebakken fish and fish cookies.
Gebakken fish and kaas met beschuit.
Fish cookies, yeah.
Yeah, fish cookies.
Yeah, so I think this is Shabbos dig enough.
Okay.
For you, not for me.
You eat Shabbos morning, you eat milchig or fleisch?
No, we eat. My family comes from Germany, France. My mother is from France, and we were going to eat fleischig on Friday night and Shabbos morning.
Yeah.
So the shlishis we eat milk.
Every school family ate milky on Shabbos.
My wife tells me that sometimes she was invited somewhere on Shabbos morning. They ate the fish cookies.
Yes.
And with kaas. Okay.
It was a milchig meal Shabbos morning. Yes.
Yeah. Echad hamabe ve'echad hamamit v'vad shechaven libo l'shamayim. Has the kavanah for Oinik Shabbos to Chabad HaKadosh Baruch Hu with such a meal. I'm sure HaKadosh Baruch Hu was happy with it.
I wish you a Chag Yerushalayim, Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Yes, you can tell me from Yerushalayim to Petach Tikva, but for you it's a special day.
Okay, it's a special day. We're getting closer to Shavuot.
For Am Yisrael, yes.
Okay.
Kol tov.
Kol tov. Thank you very much. Regard to your wife.